All right, we'll give everybody just a moment to make sure that they can get on with us, and I will make sure everything is connected as it should be. All right. I want to thank everyone again for letting us know that these series have been helpful for you. So we'll go ahead and get things started off tonight. So, good evening. Welcome to Looking Forward Live. Tonight, our topic is what if my anger is telling the truth? This is an important conversation because many people, especially people shaped by religious environments, have been taught to be afraid of their anger. They were told that anger is always sinful, that it's dangerous, that it's immature, or always evidence that they're not really trusting God. But anger is more complicated than that. Anger can become destructive, but anger can also, again, be a signal. It may tell us that a boundary has been crossed, that an injustice has occurred, that grief is underneath the surface, or that a person has been silent for too long. Tonight is not about giving permission to rage at people or justify harm. It's about learning to listen wisely to anger without being without being ruled by it. Sometimes the question is not, how do I get rid of my anger? Sometimes the better question is, what is my anger trying to tell me? Now, why does this conversation really matter? Well, this conversation matters because people who are trying to be loving, faithful, and kind often carry anger that they don't want to let anybody know, or uh, they don't know what to do with it. They may feel guilty, excuse me, even after admitting it. They may say, well, I know I shouldn't feel this way, before they've even explored what this may be saying. So, in many religious settings, people learn to equate peace with silence, but silence isn't always peace. Sometimes silence is about fear, sometimes silence is about survival, and then sometimes silence is a result of being taught that telling the truth will make you the problem. So, when anger has nowhere else safe to go, it doesn't just disappear. It often turns inward as shame, anxiety, depression, self blame, or exhaustion. Or it comes out sideways in resentment, sarcasm, distance, or sudden explosions. So, a healthy faith doesn't require emotional dishonesty. We say this each time we talk about emotions and how we feel, that a good, healthy faith doesn't require us to be stoic or unfeeling or emotionally dishonest, but a healthy faith can ask, what's the anger behind the feeling? What's this revealing? What's this saying? First and foremost, anger is a signal. Anger is an emotional signal. It points to something that needs attention. It often says that something's not okay. It may show up when a person has been disrespected, controlled, dismissed, shamed, or violated. It can also show up when someone we love has been harmed. It doesn't mean that every angry interpretation is automatically correct. Sometimes anger is shaped by fear, by past pain, by just fatigue, or maybe it's a misunderstanding. But even then, anger is still worth listening to because it tells us something is happening inside us that needs to be cared for. So the feeling is information. The response that we give to this is the formation. So, in other words, we don't have to shame ourselves for the feeling, and we don't have to obey every impulse that comes with it, but we can pause and we can listen, we can discern, and we can choose, a good way to respond. So, again, the feeling that we get, the anger is actually information, but how we respond, that's what forms us. That's our formation. So, here again, we run into when anger gets labeled sin. It gets angered sin way too quickly most of the time. That's why some people are trained to distrust their own pain. Uh, so, let's talk about this as spiritualized suppression. And again, this happens a lot in church and in religious context where spiritualized language is given to this and it causes a suppression. We suppress it and rather than dealing with the feeling. So one reason this topic is so sensitive is that anger often gets labeled as sin way too quickly. A person says, "I'm angry about what happened," and the immediate response from some people is, "Well, no, you need to forgive. You got to forgive. You got to get past it. Got to forgive it." Or don't be bitter, or just don't be angry, just submit. It's not me, it's God telling you this. God wants you to be at peace. So those statements may contain truths in a certain context, but when they're used way too quickly, they can be used as weapons to silence people's pain. They can protect the system instead of the wounded person. So again, oftentimes in church, what this is designed to do is protect the church instead of actually dealing with the wounded person. They can make the person who was harmed feel like their anger is a bigger problem than the harm itself. Seen this happen. Uh, but we have to be careful. Spiritual language can be healing, but can also be used to bypass truth. And forgiveness does matter, but forgiveness is not the same as pretending. Having peace in your life matters, but peace is not the same as protecting some dysfunction. So let's keep that in mind. Spiritual language can heal, or it can be used to silence people. So let's look at Jesus, the example of Jesus in anger. The examples we have in the Gospels. Anger was not foreign to the life of Jesus, according to the accounts we have in the Gospel. So when we look at these accounts, we don't see someone who is emotionally flat or stoic or unfeeling, uh, whatever you think of Jesus. But we see that Jesus wept, was moved with compassion, grieved. Jesus confronted injustices. He overturned tables in the temple when the sacred space was being corrupted and people were being exploited. And this matters because it shows us that anger is not automatically outside the life of faith. Jesus also shows us that anger is not petty cruelty or ego or revenge or just plain contempt. It's not about humiliating people so you can feel powerful either. But anger can be used in a way that is really like it's a refusal to cooperate with the harm that's going on. It's truth toward the service of restoration, of protection, and seeking justice. That's very different from just raging against the machine or raging against things that just simply wants to destroy or deconstruct or tear down. But anger can have a purpose in it. It can have a sort of a righteous purpose behind it. So again, uh, Christ-like anger is not necessarily cruelty, but it's a refusal to cooperate with the harm that so clearly is seen that's going on. Anger oftentimes too guards grief. A phrase I find very helpful is this one: anger is often grief wearing armor. Sometimes we feel anger first because anger gives us energy. It helps us to stand up. It keeps us from collapsing. But underneath the anger, there may be some deep, deep sadness, or it could be disappointment or betrayal, could be loneliness, or it could just be, just primal fear. A person might say, I'm angry at my family, but underneath they may be saying, I wanted them to protect me. I'm hurt and my family wouldn't protect me. A person might say, I know I'm angry at the church, but the underneath truth of it is that um, might be that they trusted people who used faith against them. So sometimes it's not just anger just because they're an angry person. So when we only condemn anger, we miss sort of the grief that's being protected. What's going on underneath? And again, healing often begins when we ask the right question. The right question could be, what hurt is my anger trying to guard? Or when you have somebody that's angry at you or angry at the church or angry at the group that you're with. Well, what's the underlying problem here? So we have to ask the right questions to actually get at what's going on. And again, just please remember that anger is often grief wearing some sort of armor. Now, let's talk for a moment about anger and boundaries. Anger often shows up around boundaries. If someone repeatedly ignores your limits or dismisses your voice or invades your emotional space or expects access to you without accountability, anger may be telling you that something needs to change. This is why anger should not be the only guide, but it shouldn't be ignored. A boundary is often anger translated into wisdom. Instead of exploding, we can ask the question, what limit needs to be named here? What's the limits that need to be put into effect? What responsibility belongs to me and what responsibility belongs to the other person or other people? And then what access is no longer healthy? I mean, are you giving people unlimited access to your life or to your energy, uh, to what you can do for them? You being asked, you know, asked way too much of is, again, people don't have a right to just unlimited access to you. But, for many people, especially people trained in people pleasing, anger may be the first sign that their soul is saying, I cannot keep abandoning myself to keep everyone else comfortable. So let's remember that. A boundary is oftentimes anger translated into wisdom. And anger often rises where limits have been ignored. So anger can reveal where yes has been enforced. It can show where access has been exceeded. And it may be calling for clarity, for some distance, or maybe even repair. And there's a difference between anger and contempt. It's important to distinguish this, anger from contempt, because anger says this matters, something needs attention, something's been violated. Contempt says you're beneath me, you're nothing, and you don't really matter. Anger can still leave room for repair, but contempt usually wants to reduce a person to the worst thing about them. So, again, this is the main difference. Anger can seek repair, where contempt seeks reduction. So, the distinction helps us remain honest without becoming cruel. We can name the harm without dehumanizing a person. We can say that what you did wasn't okay without becoming consumed with hatred. We can pursue boundaries and accountability without making revenge or our spiritual practice is somehow we're just going to get back at this person. I want them to feel what I felt. But again, the goal is being truthful and truthful. It's truthful love. It's not this self righteous hostility toward everyone else. And we need to just show here that anger, anger's in the body. Anger's not just some idea floating out there. It shows up in the body. The body often knows before the words ever hit us. We know what anger feels like. So it can be in the form of a tight chest, it could be a clenched jaw, it can be racing thoughts, it can be, just you feel your face heating up. It could be, I've known some people that get angry and just they start tearing up. Uh, so before we interpret anger spiritually or morally, it helps to notice that there's this physical component to anger. So we have to ask the questions like, what's happening in me? What did my body just perceive as a threat or as disrespect or injustice or danger? This is where a pause really matters. A pause is not denial, but a pause gives us room to choose. So we can breathe, we can notice what's going on, we can name what's happening to us. Then we can ask, what's the anger that I'm feeling pointing toward? We don't have to let anger drive the car in order to respect it as a passenger with information. So, again, the body knows before we have the words to process. So before we speak, we need to ask, what's happening? What am I feeling? What's this telling me? So the nervous system is signaling something, threat or overload or something. So that's why it's good to just pause before we interpret what we're feeling. Breathe for just a moment before responding. There's some good questions to ask when considering anger. So, uh, curiosity turns reaction into discernment. So we can ask this. We can ask, which again, a helpful practice is always to ask questions about our anger. We don't have to worship it. We don't have to obey it blindly, but we can listen to our bodies and what our anger is telling us. So we can ask ourselves, okay, what value is being violated? What boundaries being crossed? What wound is being touched? Maybe somebody's bringing up something that happened in the past you're not willing to deal with right now. Is this about the present situation that you're in? Or is the present situation connected to something that's older? This happens a lot of times with families. What do I need right now? It's a good question to ask. Do I need clarity about, have I misunderstood what this person's saying or their intentions? Maybe I just need further clarity. Am I taking this wrong? Am I taking offense to something that maybe is not intended? Maybe I just need rest. Maybe I'm just tired. I'm just upset. I've just not been able to sleep well. And maybe I just need some rest. Maybe I just need some space from the situation or the person. Maybe I need support. Maybe I need to go talk to somebody that can give me some support to let me know, hey, I'm not crazy here for feeling this way. Maybe I'm justified to feel the anger I am. Maybe I need repair, or maybe I need protection. Oftentimes, again, trauma can be a result of anger can be something connected to trauma where you should have been protected when you were young, but you didn't have the support systems there or the family structure to protect you. And then now, anytime something comes up like that, you feel like something's out of control. Then you can ask yourself, what response will protect dignity? Um, Sometimes the response is a direct conversation. It can just be, hey, this is what's going on here. What are we talking about? Uh, Sometimes it's about a boundary that somebody's crossed. Uh, Sometimes a response could be, uh, you know, a lament. Maybe you're sorry about what's happened in the past, but there's nothing you can do about it now. Sometimes it's simply waiting until the intensity lowers so you can, maybe if you're tearing up or you're just so angry or your blood pressure is boiling and you're too hot to even speak now. Maybe just uh, wait till the intensity lowers before you enter the conversation. Again, curiosity can turn reaction into discernment. So that's why asking questions is actually a good thing. So uh, don't just ask, is anger wrong? Again, ask, what is this anger revealing about the situation or the person or what's going on? And here again, this is where faith can be very helpful because faith gives us language for anger and grief through, like we said, lament through the Psalms. The Psalms are full of protest, of pain, confusion, fear, longing. Just the whole spectrum of human emotion. It can be found throughout the Psalms. It's kind of like songs you hear on the radio or songs you hear online or YouTube. Where some songs speak to you that express anger or lament or regret, or some songs are joyful, some songs are about pain. We can relate to all of these because we're human beings that have this full spectrum of feeling. And, lament teaches us that we can bring the whole emotional life before God. We don't have to hide what we're actually feeling. We don't have to hide our anger uh, because it's not mature just to hide your anger, but just again learning how to process it and figure out what's going on. We can say that this hurt. It's not right, or I don't understand. You can find all sorts of psalms like that throughout the Psalms, where just honest prayer doesn't mean we stay stuck in anger, but it does mean we can explore it. You can pray in anger and explore what's going on. It means we're bringing this into the relationship to find out with God, um, what's going on here instead of just letting this rot in secrecy and digging deeper in. And again, how can God be threatened with honest lament or honest anger? What are we talking about here? Some God that gets his feelings hurt every time we turn around. It's not much of a God worth having. Um, so what anger can become? What healthy anger can become? Anger can mature into courage, into clarity, into repair, and lead us toward justice. Anger is not a destination, but it can be a doorway. So, healthy anger can become courage. It can give us the strength to say what we're afraid to say. It can become clarity, helping us name what is ours and what's not ours. What's our responsibility and what's not our responsibility. Um, it can become protection, especially when something vulnerable is at stake. So it can help us protect ourselves. It can help enforce the boundaries that we need in our lives. Anger can also become compassion for the younger or the wounded part of ourselves that wasn't protected or that wasn't believed or allowed to speak. But again, anger is not the final destination, it can be the doorway. We walk through it toward truth and toward grief, toward boundaries, toward repair, and eventually a more grounded kind of peace. So again, anger can give us the courage to tell the truth, give us clarity to name our limits, can give us energy to protect what is sacred. And it can also be the fuel for the compassion for the wounded part of ourselves. And as we wrap up this session, I've got some reflection questions here that you can use for your own journaling, for your own prayer time or conversation, just to think about through the week. So the goal is not to become less honest, the goal is to become more whole. So, again, here's just a few reflection questions to sit with through the week. Where have I been taught to silence anger? Is it maybe a family structure or maybe a cultural issue? Maybe it is part of our church culture uh, where you've been taught to just be silent, you know, uh, silent with your anger. Secondly, what truth might my anger be trying to protect? What's the deeper issue here? Is it that I didn't feel protected? Is it that I feel like my voice has been dismissed or I haven't been listened to? Thirdly, what boundary or grief needs attention? Maybe somebody's crossing your boundaries. Again, you have people in life, they may not have the same boundaries that you do, and they assume if you have boundaries that somebody else, doesn't see as a problem. They may not know that. They may not understand why you have those boundaries. It may just be a misunderstanding. Uh, but again, you may have boundaries for a certain reason. Somebody else may have felt protected as a young child, or they were listened to. So their boundaries aren't as strict maybe as yours. And they don't understand why you've got them because they didn't have that same experience. Or again, maybe there's some grief that needs attended to. Then, lastly, here, what would a wise, loving response look like when once you've answered this question, or once you finally see what's the underlying issue here? Why am I feeling this anger? What's a wise response look like for you? So, things to think about for the week to maybe explore. And when should we seek support? Because as we say here, support isn't weakness, it's actually wisdom. It's wisdom to seek out support and help. So anger oftentimes is connected to trauma, to panic, or harm. Um, and this may need some safe accompaniment. So, if anger feels uncontrollable or frightening, if anger turns inward as shame or self harm, if past abuse or spiritual harm or trauma is involved, or if you need help finding words or language, or if you need help understanding why you need these boundaries in your life and how to maybe communicate that with other people. Uh, so, counseling can help you understand that. It can help you slow down, name what's happening, walk you through understanding the story that's underneath the emotion that you're feeling, and practice boundaries, help you practice your boundaries or repair relationships in healthier ways. Because again, support isn't weakness; it's wisdom. And here, as we close out tonight, I just want to return to the central question: What if What if my anger is telling the truth? Maybe your anger is telling the truth that something hurt. Maybe it's telling the truth that you were dismissed, that you were controlled, that you were manipulated, or maybe you were pushed past your limits. Maybe it's telling the truth that your grief has been ignored. Maybe it's telling the truth that you need a boundary. But anger should not be the only voice in the room, because we listen to anger and then we invite truth and courage and compassion to help us decide what to do next. You're definitely allowed to feel anger. We all feel anger. You don't have to feel shame for being a human. It doesn't mean you don't have faith or that you're not a strong believer. But you're also invited to let your anger mature into clarity, into courage, into repair, into enforcing some boundaries in your life, and ultimately toward your healing. So I just want to remind you again, you're allowed to feel anger. You're also invited to let it become wisdom for you. So anger's telling you something. Listen without worshiping it. Tell the truth without becoming cruel, and let anger become clarity, courage, and healing in your life. Again, thank you so much for joining me tonight for this Looking Forward Live. If this conversation has connected with you, take some time to reflect on what your anger may be telling you, is the truth about what's going on and what the next wise step might look like. Again, thank you so much. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.